although you've got an amazing team, like you see it so clearly, it's so natural for you. Whereas for me, it's taken a lot of like shuffling the pack, understanding the game, bringing the right people in, right people everywhere, and it's like it's not manufactured as such, but it's. Whereas for you, you're like a cricketer that like Ponting, just see it like.
Yeah, KP and Alistair Cook.
I'm like Graham Hill. I'm like Graham Hill.
But look, I agree, but I was saying to someone the other day, you know, it's not been plain sailing, as you well know. Like my first year, like it was pretty hairy old stuff.
Yeah, but your first year feels a long way away.
Yeah, it does. But at the time, like I was stood with my dad and Duncan Moyer, obviously our vet, and you know, we'd had 2 winners at 5%, and with some very bad horses. The horses were sick. It wasn't
in your first year.
Yeah. And we started in July, and you know, it was like I remember it vividly. Like it literally makes the hair stand up on my arms. Like we were stood at the end of my barn. I had 11 horses, and they looked awful. They were sick. It was when George was moving to Eve Lodge, and like I moved into George's old yard, and things started to change. But like, it was difficult. Like,
it's
it was
weird because
I
look back on that and I think when I think of your career as having like immediate success. You went to Bath, didn't you, on the first day or whatever? But
I remember that so well. I was at Donny watching that. I remember that.
But I look back at it and almost think it happened like immediately for you.
But I think after we got over the move to Saffron House was a big thing. You know, it was a yard that it gave me. It was at the time when we started to buy a few more horses, and we bought a sort of second batch of horses, and then the winners did start to come. But it was, at the time, we'd literally had a couple of winners. It was December of my first year. I'd been training 4 or 5 months, and it was, I think we'd had 9 seconds and 2 winners, and the stats were just poor.
But I'd say 2 things here. One, that you understood that the horses weren't right is probably the most important part of that, because there are a lot of times where people might not understand. And 2, that bit of hardship, that bit of struggle, that feeling, it's good that you had it.
For sure, yeah.
Because it's crazy that the only reason Oli can't remember it is because no one remembers it apart from you. And it's good for you. It's good for you to understand how that hurt.
I feel like my dad.
But it's true.
No, but you're right, and it's one of those things where like we all fortunately go through like purple spells where you do see it very clearly, and the whole thing is working. Your horses are well, and you almost. It's hard to see that when it does turn, and it does. You know, like we've analysed my whole training career and the months where it is harder to manage horses, and that's usually around sales and around breeze ups and around July sales when we have turnover horses, and you know I think you learn more in that than when
definitely.
you're rolling along and it's all very easy.
Yeah. Whereas for you, I almost feel like, and again, from the outside looking in, that the hardship period was perhaps slightly longer early on, and it's almost like there's 2 parts. The first few years where it didn't necessarily sort of start brilliantly, but then the second wave now, which you're in, and hopefully in for the rest of your career, is like really successful. So I wonder whether, like you were saying with Boz, whether having that early on has positioned you in a better place to really drive on now.
Yeah, no, I mean, that period in my career definitely sort of molded me, who I am now, really professionally and as a person. And you know, it was a rough time, and it's been well documented. But I learned a lot through that period. And there were times, you know, as we've said before, there were times where I didn't think there was necessarily going to be training. I mean, with George thundering away next door, it was hard for the people around me to understand why it wasn't working, because you know we're not necessarily similar characters, but we're sort of best mates and like a similar trajectory, and you know that kind of actually fundamentally put more pressure on me at the time. But
and you're pals, and you're like reveling in his success because he's a great mate of yours, but you're probably there as well going, fucking hell, why isn't this happening?
Yeah.
Like that must be a really weird juxtaposition to have to deal with.
I think all sportsmen are very similar in the sense of like when you're going on a great trajectory and you're going well, you're much more comfortable with other people's success. No matter how hard you try, if you're failing, it's very hard even to look over the fence and be deep down delighted because you just yearn for that yourself.
And I think what people outsider racing and people who don't hold a trainer's license or don't hold a jockey's license don't understand is the public nature of it. And, you know, say that you run a shop on the same street as me, it's very different. I can type George Scott in or George Boughey and see how they're doing. You know, anyone that knows us can type in and go, oh, geez, George isn't doing very well at the moment.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And it can make you make the wrong decisions, make you put horses in the wrong races. And I remember George and I chatting at length, like for years, but like there was a change in your mantra, wasn't there? You know, trying to get horses, just trying to win races and just trying to bring it back to like basics
simplify
again.
it.
And, you know, and got these horses on amazing curves of winning lots of races, you know, Pribwins and all of those sort of horses. And, you know, it's a completely different game that you play now, I feel.
Have you trained differently now then?
I think I train now with a lot more confidence than I did. I was very, not referring back to George, but I was very much like starting out, I was very comfortable with what I was doing, having had a good spell at Warren Place, but then had a rocky time with my confidence and couldn't find a routine that suited me. I think training racehorses is very individual. You can't base yourself on someone else. And I think that's the quickest way for a decline in form and things. So now, like, I train the way I train, and I never would ever compromise the way I train by what someone else is doing. Like, the whole of Newmarket could be doing something, and I'm doing something else, and I'd be in my mind, I'd be thinking that's the right thing for me. So yeah, it definitely has. I have trained differently, but for a few years now, and I've found my routine, and it fits my style.
It's just about like kind of being comfortable with what you're doing as opposed. Again, it must be when you're a young trainer coming through and you're on the gallops and you're seeing Gosden, Haggis, Appleby. Not that you necessarily see Appleby as much, given where he trains, but it must be hard as a young trainer to go, no, like you're saying, this is the way I'm doing it, and I believe wholeheartedly in that.
I also think, like, I was very lucky before I started to have been down on this road training horses, obviously with Hugo, for Hugo. I had a satellite yard for him there with Adi, who's my head lad, and you know, we found a system that sort of worked for us, in inverted commas, and like I didn't really have the horses to train when I started, but I basically just wanted to implement what I was doing. And Georgia was at Warren Place, and it's very different over here, like it is, and I found it even in the last 12 months, like getting used to moving 10 minutes down the road further has been, I'm really comfortable with where we are now, but you're always adapting. And the first 4 or 5 months, even last year, we were still taking the horse over to Warren Hill, and it was, you know, it didn't work for us. So literally one morning changed our whole routine of the whole yard, and we've never been back to Warren Hill. And it's just, you know, there's many ways to play the game, but it seems to work for us.
Bow Echo is different. Bow Echo is a horse that George, obviously, I'm going to let you take over in a second, but from the outside point of view, that I watched train through the winter. I listened to I listened to the conversations. And, you know, he was clearly being targeted for the biggest day of his life and your racing life.
Yeah.
And, you know, it wasn't just a you know, a good draw and a good ride. It was an absolute home run. And, you know, that is exactly drawing back to what you said. You know, that showed real quality, but it's no surprise because you do it day in, day out with the weaker horses, the lesser horses. Yeah. And it all came together perfectly.
I just think with him, the one thing that I had when we changed from training on Warren Hill, you know, there'd never been a 2000 Guineas winner trained on the Hamilton Road, and you know, for a colt, he's an amazing athlete. He doesn't take as much. He now takes quite a lot of work, but through the spring, he was a very easy horse to get fit and get ready, and he just needed educating. And like, for me, the tried and tested 2 canters up Warren Hill, you know, he has a very different routine. Like anyone who saw him train this morning, and he does 1 canter down the farm canter and breezes now twice a week. But there was a bit of me that was like, can we do it from here? And I had a very prominent racing manager say to me recently, they said, you know, we were surprised and doubted your decision to move this far away from Warren Hill because it's such a sort of iconic place to train horses. But
it's safety net.
It's safety net, and I think, you know, George and I stand down the farm canter weekly and think, you know, if we move this gallop to Shropshire and the facilities, the vets, the race courses, everything, we have, in my opinion, as good a facilities as anyone. It's just a different routine.
But don't you think that that is like slightly going off tack in terms of training? But don't you think that is not an issue with racing, but that perception, like, oh, no one's done it here before. Can they do it? Is like when you look at racing as a whole, that attitude doesn't hold the sport back, but it's so good to see people doing things differently and the success that can be had when you slightly deviate from what has always been done in the sport. Like we're talking, I'm sure we'll talk about much wider issues in racing whilst we chat, but I've always felt personally with racing that it can be slightly stuck in its ways a bit. And when someone shows that it can succeed outside of the norm is really refreshing, I think.
I think so, and I think, but also like, we've both had to do things that are slightly outside the box to make yourself relevant in the sport and get noticed and get going. And like I feel like I and my team have adapted year on year to try and get the better type of horses. When I started training, I wanted to buy the worst type of horses I could possibly get my hands on to try and train winners, and 5 to 6 furlong 2-year-olds to just get going. And it was sink or swim sort of stuff, but that was for me, the typical way would be to try and buy nice horses and try and find a nice horse. And we're only now able to go and try and source nice horses, but just trying to think slightly outside the box to get noticed, to get those horses in our yards, I think.
What's interesting, again, is probably something that we'll touch on, is like how this game is going. Like for me, it's becoming very, very elitist and focalized. And
hasn't it always been that a bit?
I don't know. I think with the less people are able to own racehorses, and the less diverse pool of owners, I think it's becoming even tighter. And I think what you're seeing across the board with trainers and jockeys and even racecourses is the more powerful operations are getting a bigger slice of the pie. And the middle guy, and there'll always be a place for the lower end, because obviously it's actually quite well run. The lower end, it's a product for betting. But what we're seeing is the middle guy is really struggling. And going back to what you said, like it's a case of kind of getting noticed and trying to navigate your way through this sort of middle ground to get. There's no point complaining. There's no point complaining about any sport. It's like the Premier League. Like it's like just get in the Premiership, do everything you can in the first.
I think it's the same with almost a lot of stuff in the world.
Yeah, it's high tier. People
but it's
want
kind
that.
of like, for example, Amazon. People are buying everything off Amazon now. The person in the shop where
high street shops are closing down.
Like we went to get India, my daughter's shoes measured the other day, and they didn't have any shoes in her size, and they were like, "Oh, we'll just buy them online." And it's kind of like if we run a horse at a lesser track on a Saturday, the owner wants a top jockey. There's 6 meetings. You can't have a top jockey. Everything is becoming channeled towards the top end. Like, football, all sorts of walks of life. It's all about, everyone wants to go and watch Man United or the top club now. They don't want to go to Cambridge, even though it's a local club. You want to go to London to watch the best team. And I think the pyramid is getting smaller, but that just, for me, drives me more.
It's the scramble to the top.
Yeah.
That's how I find it.
Is that bad?
Well, it's what it is. It is what it is.
Positive.
Yeah,
really?
It is what it is. Well, we're lucky because we are in a scramble for the top. I think what's been interesting is actually a policy change to try and promote the bigger races and the better horses, which I think is, as George is kind of leading on to, I imagine it is a positive, because if we don't have that product, we're not going to draw the audience, we're not going to draw the horses, we're not going to draw the ownership. So I think it's important.
But it's also like the 2 feature races in the next 10 days, the King George and the Sussex Stakes, for example, the 2 most valuable races. The King George is now worth £2 million, which is anywhere in the world is a phenomenal amount of money to present for a horse race. George's Bay City Roller, I imagine, will be left in the hoping that there's slow ground, Whereas before
you to the track with his water.
you can get a very small field in the King George. It's going to attract the 16-to-1 shot to run rather than to go elsewhere, to go to France or something.
But £2 million in the King George will still attract whether it's 1.5 or 2 million. But that 500 grand could go a long way. Like, this is the opposing view. That 500 grand could go a long way to sort of class 4 races throughout the week in the lead up.
I completely agree, and I think the area where it does struggle is the 0 to 85 bracket, which is a very global product. If you've got a mile to 10 furlong horses in 0 to 85, I watched a 4-runner 0 to 85 the other day for 3-year-old and above. it's terrible. You know, that is where all the horses are.
Is that the one I won?
I think it's 3 runners. Yeah, and it's one.
It's absolutely delicious.
No, there was another one. There was another one. It was on another. I can't remember where it was, and that's where it's difficult. But I think if you're trying to, fundamentally, we need to keep the breed as strong as it is. It probably is lessening over time, and if those horses are going abroad, you know, they need to. I pray that the Sussex does have a 10-runner field because it deserves it for the prize money. And 4-runner races are not what anyone wants to watch. It's not a good betting medium. It's not a good spectacle usually, and
because so we're talking about the success you're having, like, and you're rightly saying that you're kind of competing in the Premier League now, or driving towards the Premier League anyway. Recently, I mean, one of our good mates, James Ferguson, who we grew up kind of on this path together with, has had to find a different career. So, like, it's a hard game if you're not in or around the Premier League, isn't it? And actually, it's ultimately a game that isn't viable for some people. Yeah,
exactly. It's about the people that are at the top or approaching the top, not necessarily us. About obviously looking to promote and look after the middle tier as well. The situation, the training racehorses is a very, very difficult business model on the day-to-day of the training, you know, and the prize money and the trading of horses is something that keeps the business afloat. You know, in regards to James, it's actually it's terribly sad, really, because you know, if you look at his statistics,
the Group 1 winning trainer.
Yeah, and actually even beyond that, just a very good base of numbers behind him. But it's unfortunately, as I say, like you know, we're beating the drum about certain issues, and the reality is being laid on our doorstep, and that's people aren't going to have space in the game unless fundamental changes are made.
How can we make it inviting?
Well, I actually think like it almost goes further than like the actual setup of a racehorse trainer now compared to what it used to be. If you break it down to the small factors of staff and costings of everything, like George and I, dads, are both farmers. You have a very small workforce that work on your farm. My staff is getting bigger and bigger and bigger because it has to, you know, people used to ride 2 horses and look after 2 horses. It doesn't work, you know, like, it doesn't work like that anymore. And our wage bills and everything are going so high that if you aren't, as George says, trading horses and you're not winning the prize money, like my prize money goes back into my business. People would think that it's your sort of wage.
Yeah, you're on holiday at the end
it's
of the year.
just, it just isn't. And I want to get to the point where that can be the case. Like I told it to a very prominent owner a couple of years ago, and they were just appalled that like that isn't whatever we earn 10% doesn't just go into an account. I've never ever once.
Well, black hole,
but that's the thing, because from the outside looking in, we'd think you're making a load of money and you're having a lot of success. But the reality isn't that, right?
You know, we were fortunate enough to bump into Boughey this year. He won the Guineas, which is the new market feature. It's 20 odd grand into the account, which pays my wage bill for 1 week. And that's the reality of it. You
Not
know,
your wage bill, by the way, the staff wage. Sorry,
staff wage,
just to be clear.
And it's things like that where, you know, James, it's desperately sad to see it. You know, there are times where, even in the last 6 months, where it's been tight to pay the wage bill and cash flow and those sort of things. And you know,
for you,
like it's
for real,
and for me,
and that's
genuinely.
Slow payers, a couple of slow payers, and my officer said, I'm tight on the wages this week.
We had the May bank holiday where if we didn't get some money in by the Wednesday when the payroll goes out, it wouldn't have worked. And that's something where, like, you know, we need to do better. It strives me to be better, but if you've got a few people that are slightly slow on paying and you've got to...
But that's not on you.
That's not...
But it's cash flow, but that's running a business, won't it?
Yeah.
You know, if the cash flow is obviously the hardest part.
And so trading horses, and it's hard, you know, there's some fantastic trainers who don't train that many good horses because they win a maiden and they're moved on.
Right.
You know, like
But that's a worry for British racing though, isn't it?
For sure it is, yeah.
Because it goes back to what John Gosden was saying a few years ago about us being a feeder to jurisdictions around the world.
There's no, I mean, that's just black and white of it, isn't it? When you're buying horses at the sales, George and I will often buy horses with the sole idea that they'll be sold on to race abroad. I mean, and that's part of our business model. So, Yeah,
You know,
but
George
you
and I-
can't see that changing in the short term.
I don't think that will
Has
ever,
always happened.
I
as
don't
well.
think we'll ever change that, and it's one of those things where like you have to be a bit of a punter as well in racing to buy a horse to trade. Like George and I both sold horses this year, which keeps us rolling into the next year. You know, we've been able to sell Group 1 fillies, and the commission enables you to get to the next step and to, you know, between Believing, Soprano, Cachet, Via Sistina, they've kept the business, they've brought the business to where we are now.
Yeah.
And without that, it's just not possible.
But you guys are two of the kind of hottest properties in the training game, and you're both sat here saying that, like, at various stages this season, it's been squeaky bum time with the kind of wage bill going out. So if you're a young racing fan or youngster wanting to get in the game from a training point of view, like, that doesn't sound the most appealing. So what can be done to kind of incentivize people or keep it thriving, basically, so we have the next Boughey Scott coming through?
It's certainly not sort of doom and
Poorly,
gloom.
yeah.
I'm really,
of course.
I'm
Yeah,
really
yeah.
not
It's
like
just-
that. But it's like running any business. You know, we've got friends who are entrepreneurs that do lots of different things around the world, and you know, it's hard. You know, staffing things is difficult. There are so many troubles. It's not just us.
Yeah.
And it's, for me, I actually just see it as a massive inspiration to be better and to try and break into that top level to make it really work.
Do you feel like sportsmen? I know that may sound odd. I mean, you're competitive, you want to do better, you want success. Like, is your mindset that of a professional sports person, would you say?
I love the day to day. I love the battle day to day of a professional sportsman.
Yeah.
I love the winning and losing. If people say, "Oh yeah, what's your favourite part?" I love the winning and losing.
Yeah.
That feeling I get. So
I hate a day when I don't have a runner.
Me too. I feel a bit low when I don't have runners.
Yeah.
Really?
It's pathetic.
Yeah,
If I
yeah.
go on a Saturday and I'm not involved in the racing, I just won't watch it because I'll just be jealous of everyone racing.
Really?
Yeah. I hate it. I want runners
for
every
me,
day.
the day to day is more rewarding, and like, you know, when you see your horses and they're in a very good frame of mind and they're moving well, and you know you've got runners coming up, like I imagine that's like going into a Euros or the World Cup and you've got your team and they're bubbling away and they're going good, and you know, like into the spring, I felt with Bo Echo, I was like, I think I said it in the press, I couldn't be 1% happier.
Yeah.
And that to me is like, it's an amazing place to be in.
Do you like, some days you like open your entries and like you'll just see like, oh, I'll win that, I'll be better that, I'll win that, and then some days you're like got ages, oh, I cannot see a winner. It's just like black in front of you, and it is interesting. Like what really gets me is like I'm opening like the card at Ascot and the entry stage, and I'm like, why do I not have a runner for that in that race? You know, I'm watching the July Stakes. Why have I not got a runner for that, or the Papin? You know, that's what drives me to be. And also I've got obviously the patronage of Sheikh Nasser, who just is just like just an absolute sports fan through and through, and wants it to be a 365-day thing as well. So I agree.
But does it consume you? I mean, clearly it does, right? So when we see you at the big meetings having success, we've spoken about some of it already. Like, great, nice and shiny, everyone knows you're doing well. But like, what's it like
the day-to-day
on a Monday when you don't have running? Are you just does racing completely take over your life?
I actually probably love the training of it as much as the success or failure in the afternoon. Like it's solely consuming. I don't think if you did it 2 days a week, I don't think you'd train horses.
So you're
like
thinking
that.
about it 24/7?
And
Really?
I was sat in your seat watching the football with George, and I was trying to find Philly's
So
handicap.
what are you doing?
He was like, what are you
He was
doing?
on racing admin in the 60-minute England-Argentina. I said, what are you doing? And I actually said to him, I bet you're looking for a handicap for that thing that won today, aren't you? Like, but he's a real smackhead for placing horses and tinkering, and like
you've always loved that.
Yeah,
though.
and that to me, like going like further back to it, that was probably really my I love the intellectual challenge of like, it's almost like I used to play Football Manager, like addicted to Football Manager at school, like wildly addicted. That and sort of starters orders and that sort of thing, and like the whole programming of it. G1 jockey, it's brilliant, but it's.
We had very similar schooling.
Yeah.
You would have been champ man.
Champ man,
I love the whole, you know, I look at my racing admin account as like a Football Manager back in the day, and it's programming horses into things, and like I'd like to think if anyone called me about their horse, I could tell them where my plan is, and owners can actually see where you enter them a month in advance, and it's a little bit annoying because it can be a little bit far-fetched for horses going to certain places. But that programming to me is everything.
Yeah.
Like when my whole stable went to Bath on the first day, all of them there. I asked Sam Haggis to try and find me a horse for a 0 to 55. I don't think anyone's ever sent an order to someone to try and find a horse for 55. So we put every horse from 46 to 55 over 7 furlongs in the country and bought the horse that we thought would win. It didn't, but that sort of thing, I love that.
So that mentality's been there from the very start.
Yeah.
I'd be the same with my racing admin. I'd like, if anyone saw what I looked over my shoulder in the morning at entries, they'd just think I was a loon, because I go back to the entries 15, 20 times, try and work a horse into that race, try and make as many entries as I can, and try and look for races that
But isn't it like an artist with a canvas? Can you do too much? Can you over?
I don't know. I think you can. I mean, as long as the final product is not rushed or forced, I think that's the main thing.
But I think it's kind of like Rizal going to Hamilton on Saturday. I mean, it was an absolute certainty. There probably is too much racing, in a sense, but it has certainly enabled me to get up the ladder. If every field had 16 runners, I wouldn't be sat here chatting to you probably quite so quick. We've been able to 9:59, 11:59. The tracking, when I worked for Hugo initially, you didn't have the entries tracking, the decks tracking. Being able to see the races and be like, well, I have to have something in that race. Like, we won a 2-year-old race last year, one of the first 2-year-old races at Kempton, with a Memas filly, Sheikh Mohammed Obeid. It had done one piece of work before the entries, and I got it ready in 5 days, and it was 2 on, and it won by 3 lengths. But it was so bad, I had to have a horse running in it, and Henry and I picked the chosen one, and it ended up getting it done. But she never won again. She was no good. But it's things like that. That
there are hours and hours done by trainers on the iPad
that no one sees.
No, hours. I mean, as George said, like, when I always do a lot of it when the kids are kind of getting ready for bed and stuff, and I'll just be sitting in my room in the chair, and they'll be like messing around playing, and I'll just be like going through. They would remember me for being sat there, but it just never stops. And going back to the training, I wake up in the morning and I cannot wait to get out and see the horses train. Like, when it gets to like 10:30, I feel a bit like, I really enjoy the horse side of it as well. And now we're obviously lucky to have these better horses, and it really gets me going watching the better horses work and the young horses work. It's kind of sick, really.
Do you ever wish you could switch off a bit more?
No.
Like, have you got the balance right?
Basically? I don't. I try to basically just have children and work, and that's it.
I actually feel in the last couple, to me, it did get a bit obsessive at one point. I'm sure it did. I think we had 130 odd winners in my 3rd year, and we had 125 seconds or something. We're on a third of that this year, and we're training a different type of horse. It was massively addictive, and I can actually switch off better now than I used to. It used to be 24 hours a day, but I think the good horses are the things that really get you going. The lower grade horses, it's like kind of a nursery to being better. But Bo Echo gets me up at 4:30 every morning. It's wild sort of adrenaline to try and make him the best horse he can be. And I found it hard after Casho for a couple of years, because sure, we did end up having a couple of good horses, but that euphoria of winning a classic I see why people run horses in them now. I used to think, what are they doing? Why? But to reach that height it was hard to feel again. It's like a substance abuser, I imagine.
Yeah, but it is a drug, isn't it? You want it.
Yeah, and Via Sistina was amazing, but it was nothing on that sort of level. And then Bo Echo, it's like steroids on top of.
Well, I bet.
That Bo Echo Guineas there, I was just like.
That was so cool though, because
just that feeling.
We all revelled in that. I mean, the euphoria you must have felt would be like. I mean, I can't even comprehend it, because I felt something there. The race goers at Newmarket felt something there. It helped your confidence beforehand, the amount you did with the media. Billy as well, obviously, kind of embracing it after the race as well.
It was one of those things where, like, in life, I very rarely get like huge satisfaction out of something, Billy even said about 6 weeks before, he told me afterwards that about 6 weeks before he was thinking, what is he on about here, sort of thing. And but to have him ready for the day, I said he's going to be ready at 11:30 on Guineas morning. And I was on a run, and I texted him, I stopped on my run, I said, he's ready. And he was like, okay, whatever, here we go. And he went bang, and he texted me that, well, he was here, he came for a drink afterwards, he was like, you had him to the minute,
Yeah,
sort of
you
thing.
did.
But that to me is like, is everything, you know.
Yeah.
What happened at Ascot in the sense of because everyone else has their idea of what happened. What happened from your point of view? Like if you look back to his preparation or the tactics or like what happened? Because the gap was bridged significantly.
Billy blames himself, doesn't he?
I blame
Billy?
myself.
Really?
Yeah, I kind of blame myself. I think if you're not learning, you know, like I campaigned him differently to Cachet, they were different horses, but I possibly had a slight lack of faith in him getting out of trouble if he got in trouble, and I wanted him ridden a rank further forward, and that possibly caught Ryan and William off guard because Billy was there when usually he's out the back, and I just didn't. I was waiting for Aidan to declare 4 to have us on the fence. So, you know, if I had 4, I'd run 4.
Yeah.
And I think if we'd been taken back from the gate, I think it would have been a much smoother race because obviously Billy wouldn't have said to Ryan and William that he's going to be further forward, and you don't expect the yellow colours to be upside you, and it created a skirmish.
It was a great image, wasn't it? An image that I don't think
extraordinary.
you'll never forget that. When those 3 heads were like, Bo Echo's got this point at like.
I almost want to get it framed, just that shot.
Nice wall space,
yeah.
It was great.
But and for me, the one thing that I've always said and been public about, and said to you and more, you know, he's so relaxed, he's so chilled, and he's got this extraordinary turn of foot. You know, a turn of foot that I definitely haven't had a horse. We've had faster horses, you know, Group 1 sprinters or whatever, but he is the fastest horse I've trained, and we just weren't able to harness that early. So he was on the metal for 3 furlongs. Billy did a brilliant job, but he then had to commit when David Egan on Power Blue was weakening, and he had to commit at the wrong part of the track. Basically everything that we didn't want to happen happened. And you know, Billy is a consummate professional. At his own admission, he said it wasn't probably his finest hour.
But was he riding to your instruction?
No, he has a total free rein as to do what he wants. But I thought
had a game plan.
We had a game plan, and you know, I'd be pretty open about it going forward. My game plan now is to take our time with him, like we did as a 2-year-old. You know,
He's a motorbike horse.
He's rapid.
He's a motorbike horse.
I'd fancy him in a Group 1 over 6 furlongs.
Really?
He's that fast, and he just needs to get the first part of the race right.
Yeah.
And then and then he just drops the lot. In the Guineas, it was very different. You know, obviously they went an even gallop, but I told Billy, I said to him, we walked the track 7 times or something, literally every other night for 2 weeks, and I wanted him to nearly be last at the 2 furlong marker, and I thought that he would run from here to there, the 400 metres faster than any other horse. And he obviously got there a bit sooner.
So it's amazing that you changed it so much in such like that. As you say, you as a trainer error, but that you had such a clear idea of what he was and his identity, and then going to Ascot, you made this big move. I mean, what was fascinating?
we watched every St James's Palace on the screen there, and St James's Palace
With Billy?
is very hard.
You and Billy watched
It's
them
very
all?
hard to make up ground on the round mile at Ascot. It's also very hard to make all on the round mile at Ascot. But Kingman, in the last 12 years, was basically the only horse to have done it, and they went a million. And he obviously picked them up easily. But it is so hard. Field of Gold was quite far back, but the race fell apart. I didn't want to be trapped on the fence, and they hugged the rail. So if we were ranked further forward, it gave us a chance to pull out and come off the fence. So we're always learning.
I'd love to have been a fly on the wall for that when you're just here drawing up the battle plan. That must have been quite a cool, like, however long it took.
They took it, I mean, it was all public, because it was all on the thing. You took it to the point where you worked the horse differently as well.
Yeah, we worked him in front on the Albahatchery into Ascot.
In case he had to make it.
He jumped and he sat on the front end, and you know, we tried to cover every angle, and then option 247 turned up on the.
But that's the amazing thing about, like, you know, obviously it's so cool to be able to kind of really pick apart the horse and the training and the race. Yeah. But like every horse day to day has its own set of
Yeah,
circumstances and its own set of conditions in a race. And I think sometimes it's very easy to overlook the variables that are completely out of anyone's hands, like the way a race sets up. You know, you could run a race, and it's a cliche, you run a race 10 times, you get 8 different results, you know, and it's cool to be able, because you've had so much data, everything's been so public, you've got such a good understanding of the horses. That, what George is sort of forensically doing now, is a big part of the day-to-day. You know, with every horse.
When you went to the sales when you were starting out, you, as you were saying, you wanted winners, you wanted your name sort of seen and in lights, so people went, yeah, he can do it, drive on. Like, because you've had lots of top level success now, do you have a different approach? Like, I wonder whether the young trainers are going to the sales looking to buy a Derby horse. Like, the Derby's a talking point, and I'm sure we'll touch on it in a moment, but what's your MO now when you go to the sales compared to 5-10 years ago when you were starting out?
For example, I didn't look at colts at yearling sales when I started, because a colt at the lower level typically is a gelding. Fillies hold more of a value. That's why we had better fillies to start with. We're now buying colts, and you know, I think for me it's I'd buy a 5 furlong horse or buy a horse to win over 2 miles. But at the start, I personally didn't think I could buy 1.5 mile horses, because they don't get going for another year. I didn't know if I'd still
that nearly killed me.
I didn't know if I'd still be relevant.
What, trying to buy 1.5 horses?
Yeah, we did really well with speed horses, and I sort of had this kind of idea that we wanted to like move into the trading side and middle distance thing, and we spent 2 years buying middle distance horses, and suddenly we had no 2-year-old winners, and we were just, that was part of the reason we found ourselves on fumes. But yeah, you're I remember so well because you had those days of Nick Bradley and things. You had so much success with those cheaper fillies.
And I think it's kind of, you know, there's so many ways to do it, but I genuinely didn't feel I had more than a 3 or 4 year window to make it work, because it's such a difficult game. And like I remember saying, you know, if I don't have 75 horses in 5 years, I don't think it's viable to do it. You know, you need the numbers to be able to find the good horses to make it work. As we've touched on, it's difficult. But that was just my mantra, and luckily it kind of sorted itself out to make it work.
Where does the Derby rank in your eyes? There's been a lot of focus on it recently, lots of talk about its significance, I guess, in 2026. Like, is that still the pinnacle for you, would you say?
I think
you and the other young trainers that you speak to?
Well, I think you can only speak for yourself. I think now being given the opportunity to get your hands on that type of, I think when you know it's completely out of reach, then maybe your priorities are slightly different. Now we're getting an opportunity to get some middle distance stock, then for me it's right up there with it's number one, you know. And I think, you know, the ambitions of those sort of those top owners, you know, the guys that have the resources, are, you know, I think that would align.
Would it be Sheikh Nasser's kind of like?
100%.
That's encouraging. That's encouraging for the race, anyway.
I would completely agree with George as well, and I think the Derby has obviously gone through a funny stage recently, and I think they've been unfortunate with the ground for a few of them, which has changed the shape of the race. But like, you know, we're getting sent a horse now, not that many of them, but it is increasing that when you get allocated said horse, it's the first thing you think about. If it's a Frankel that's bred to get 1.25 miles, could it win a Derby? You know, I've got a Frankel filly who's for Sheikh Mohammed Obeid, who's out of a filly who was second in the Guineas. Is she an Oaks filly? You know, that is the pinnacle of what we try and do. And I think when you start, you know, Bay City Roller winning the Coronation Cup, I know it sounds mad, but I actually roared that horse home more than any of my Group 1 winners that I have, because it was like, it is huge. Epsom is right up at the pinnacle. You know, could Bay City Roller be a Derby horse at that sort of time? No, probably not. He wasn't mature enough. He didn't, with the ground wouldn't be right. So many things have to come right for them, but like, going there, I think they did an amazing job. It was a shocking day this year.
I think they did great as well.
A huge credit to Epsom, because like, it's close to London. Like George Baker, as he rightly says, you know, he's doing very well down there. It's got a catchment area where it can be cool, and you know, a lot of our friends turned up, and I think repeat custom is massive. And the Guineas nailed it this year, but the weather was good. Boeco, like our generation, there were lots of them there. But I just hope for Epsom that it can lift, because the slight lack of strength of the Derby almost makes it more appealing to try and find a horse to win the Derby.
Yeah, absolutely.
In my opinion.
There is that actually, isn't there?
For
Other
sure.
people are sort of...
100%.
For sure. And the first 3 home in the Derby, don't forget, were bought at sales this year. And we trained the 3 siblings to the Derby. Not the Derby winner.
What I was pleased with was actually that the Jockey Club and everyone who had clearly put an awful lot into trying to make the Derby again, that everyone was kind of forgiving to circumstances out of their control and went, fair play for trying, because it was very clear that there was a massive effort put on that race, and the things out of their control were out of their control, right?
Yeah, I think Peter Stanley, who's been a driving force behind the sort of some of the changes there, rang me a few months before and basically said, we're going to do these picnics, would you invite your owners? We're just trying to basically create more of an atmosphere, bring more interest to the race. Of course, that's not anything like the sole driving point from the Jockey Club, but one of the things, and the way I looked at it, and the way I think we all need to look at it, is like, if I don't do my bit, small bit, then how am I going to expect it, for the race to start to develop and flourish? And I think that's the same. So I brought 50 people to the Derby and gave them a picnic. I mean, as it turned out, I was so late I didn't even get a drink.
Got to do your bit, right? Turn up on time. It's your bit.
Just on weather watch.
I was just
just rain dancing your way to Epsom.
Sitting in the car praying, and the Derby is by no means a forlorn hope. It's gone through a bad period of time. It's gone through a bad period. It's been left to sort of fester a little bit, and it's actually just been left to sit on its haunches. It's the Derby. It'll be okay. Well, it won't be okay because it's prehistoric in some of the ways that it conducts itself. But if we can all start to pull in the right direction, it's just still the most magical race.
Yeah. But I think if you actually, my dad's a very big person for just zooming out of things. If you look at the Derby over the hundreds of years, whatever, it might have had a very small blip of a few years. You zoom out, it's basically irrelevant. It can very easily get back on track. And I think, like one of the great horses of the modern generation, City of Troy, is a Derby winner. He won a Jubmont. He's a monster. He was 3-1 for a Breeders' Cup. That was 2 years ago. Like, we mustn't forget that.
Even Motivator's Derby was like back in the old days.
He bolted up,
But you see the red buses in the background.
But that was 2005. That wasn't that long ago, but it's been a while since that image of everyone lining the...
No, the Derby, I think, I don't speak for everyone, but I think the Derby's still the race to win. And then fundamentally, if that is what everyone is thinking, if that's what the industry is thinking, we can pack around it and make it...
It created a bit of needle with Gosden and O'Brien. Did you enjoy...
But that is just slightly fictional, the needle, isn't it? I mean, it would be more fun if there was a bit more to it, but they don't have time. But it is.
I loved it.
It is quite fictional, with the ombudsman coming over to the Irish champion and stuff. I mean, it's one throwaway comment.
Do you chat much to the Aidens, and like when you're at the races? Would you? I mean, I doubt you see them much, but obviously the
Aiden's is just incredible. I mean, we're like a fan zone for Aiden here.
Yeah.
Really.
But it's one of the...
Is he the one, like, the pinnacle? I mean, obviously.
For sure, without doubt. And, he's an extraordinary man. His attention to detail, even for, say his staff, it's almost quite comical how he recites it. It's just so amazing. I couldn't do that. But, he made a point to come over and congratulate me again about Royal Ascot when I was at the Curragh on Saturday.
And you're the one beating his horse.
He's chipped in a couple of times, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has.
That's his competitive nature. He can't help it.
But it's fun, and I also think, your question earlier about do you feel like a sportsman? I feel like I want to give my bit to the sport in a positive way. I think George Smiley, who obviously manages my sort of PR and media, we sat down at the start of the turf season or before it, and I wanted to try and paint a picture of Boughey into the season. I think Coolmore have also done that. They've been much more open than years gone by, and I think Aiden's an amazing competitor, and he has the cream of the crop, and it's brilliant to see it. And
But that's really interesting, because I think that Coolmore have really ramped up their access and their social media, and like as a racing fan, you kind of are starting to see a little bit behind the curtain, which is brilliant. You did that with Boughey, amazing.
I'm a racing fan.
Yeah, for sure.
I watch
You're the biggest racing fan I
I'm
know.
the biggest racing fan in the world. Like, I love watching their stuff. I love watching George's. Fundamentally, I'm nosy. Like, I have a horse in training with Gay Waterhouse, a tiny percent, because I like seeing what other people do, and I find it interesting. And
but there's a responsibility, and this is again from speaking as racing fans. You are in a position, to a certain extent, I'm in a position where we need to showcase the sport as well as we can to fans, new, old, whatever, right? All ages. And it's really refreshing to hear you fully understand and grasp that, because the sport is going through a turbulent stage with lots of things, affordability checks, loads of things slightly out of our control, to a certain extent, certainly out of our three's control. We have to do, like you say, our bit, I think, to make this sport look as appealing as possible.
But and also, like,
and being open is key.
You brought yourself into that, and I completely agree. And it's kind of, you know, I'll never forget, this is going way back, but I was at Tattersall Sales, age 18. I walked past Johnny Murter in one of those like kissing gates sort of almost things. And he said hello to me as if he was like my best friend. I'd never met him before. He rode motivated to win the Derby, and I was like, what has happened there, sort of thing. And it's kind of like, you know, you're a very personable person. Like, I'd like to think that we all are trying to bring people forward. And like, I did a selfie with a group of guys at the Guineas, and then I saw them at Chester 6 days later, and we did another selfie, you know, and they showed me the one, and it's that sort of thing which is bringing people into it and making it, you know, Aidan stopping and saying hello to everyone and me and saying well done and that sort of thing. It just gives that sort of feel-good factor into the sport, I feel. And
it's access, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
like,
racing way better than any other sports for access to you guys, jockeys.
If it's managed right. I mean, I'm a sports fan. I love all sport, and but say UFC. Like, I don't follow UFC or anything. But suddenly, if I get into a little bit of a rabbit hole about the Sunday night fights on Instagram through their channel, watch a couple of interviews, watch a couple of fights. Suddenly, I want to click on the Sunday night. I want to watch that fight. And that's what I think we could do a lot better, is just try to paint a picture going into the weekend.
Right.
You know, I really believe.
How would that look?
Well, I mean, I think just a bit more access to the build-up, talking about the race and the jockeys, the trainers, the horses, and just start like the King George. Like, there should be some form of channel whereby the main protagonists have been interviewed and like discussed.
A little bit like the Breeders' Cup doing the week into it. I suppose funding is a massive thing, and geography is another thing. You know, having an Oli Bell at Baldings and Gosdens and Scotts and Aidens and whatever, it's very hard to do. Whereas when you're on a track, it's localised. Of
course.
Like in Australia, I think they do it very well into the big festivals. But I think if I want to watch it as a trainer, the public who have an interest in it surely want to watch it.
Yeah.
And I'd like to be able to provide a little bit, you know, Boughey, everyone's seen Boughey work on Saturday. I feel like it's good for the game to see that.
I think you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you, I mean, I've heard, I think we spoke about it in the past, a really good idea that I don't know which one of you had, maybe collectively, of like, almost like a press conference before the big event. And you're saying like, in Breeders' Cup, everyone's at San Trinita or whatever, I get that. But nowadays, you could get the jockeys of the leading fancies, the trainers, all on a Zoom, get the press, racing fans, you know, I don't know, I'm sure it's pretty easy to get people like logging onto a Zoom to watch it, where you're building up a bit of noise about the main event. Like Goodwood's on the horizon, you're obviously going to open your doors to press and whatever regarding Boughey, you are here now. But actually having that ahead of each of the big races on Saturday could make a bit of a stir about what's coming up.
I watched managers' interviews into Saturday football matches on the Thursday or whenever they're done. You know, I think it was George that actually came up with the idea with George Smiley about, you know, say in Newmarket, you just nip down at 4:45 for 10 minutes. Say about your runners the weekend. Like, but I remember back in the day, and he probably still does it, but Richard Fahey used to have 30 runners on a Saturday, and I would see his little snippet on Sporting Life.
Yeah, he does still do that.
As a racing fan, used to click on that and watch everything.
I'd always
have a
read
bet
that
on Fahey's best chance.
Yeah,
you know, right, and that to me is, it's so easy. So I used to think that Richard Fahey was sat there typing it out. He probably doesn't know how to use an iPhone. But like, it's, you know, me speaking to George, bang, it's up there.
No, it's definitely
those sort of things.
I think
that's not that hard as well. You guys in Newmarket giving up 10 minutes of your time. Sky Sports News on a Thursday or Friday will make a 2-hour news kind of program looped on the managers' press conferences.
But they have to do it.
Yeah.
You know, there's no obligation for trainers to do it. But I'd almost like it to get to a point where trainers do have to do it.
Yeah.
To broaden people's...
And jockeys.
Yeah, but jockeys are harder because they're racing, for example, say. But like, you know, in person, doing it in person. But I just think, speaking about horses, it makes it more interesting. It's sort of...
creating a narrative about a race.
100. I don't really know much about the King George this weekend.
No, and it's really
about what's
one of
actually
the
happening.
best King
you
Georges
know, like,
for a while.
Like I
Most
love
interesting.
Ombudsman. Like I'm a massive Ombudsman fan. I thought he was the horse for the week at Ascot, and he proved to be that horse.
Yeah.
Didn't really see much of Ombudsman into it, and you know he's a sort of Gaiath-like character. You know, he could go and win everything.
The horses will always be the stars. Like, no matter what you do, the ancillary stuff around it, which is obviously important, like a great horse like Bo Echo has captured the public's imagination. Now, you've helped that by being as accessible as you are, but by creating narratives about the horses and the stars that we back, cheer on every Saturday, I think when we talk about all the other things in racing, at its core, that will always be the most important thing, personally. I think creating stars of the horses and
it's harder in flat
racing
racing because, you know, they're not with us for as long. Bay City Roller, for example, is only, you know, he's an older horse. He's getting going now. But Bo Echo, you know, you might not see that much more of him. We don't know. It's all obviously up in the air. But it's harder when you're not public with a horse. You know, Bo Echo's only run 5 times. You know, if I didn't speak to the press about him, no one would really know about him. You know, at the end of the day, we are trying to create a stallion. That is I should probably concentrate more on the training of the horse sometimes rather than programming him to be the best stallion he can be. But that, I feel like, is my duty to his pedigree and his profile. So I feel like our Group 1 winners have all had a little bit of captured the public because
definitely.
we do, you know, even believing she obviously was a very good filly. She could have won a number of Group 1s. She was a little bit unlucky, but people knew about her probably more than they should have because we and Highclere were very open talking about her.
Yeah. Do you think is there anything else like obvious that you look at racing? I mean, we've spoken basically our whole life about racing, and I've always come from a slightly more left field approach, I would say, for changes. I've always been like anti-dress codes because I think, you know, I've spoken about it before, but things like that, trying to move away from the kind of Dickensian attitude to the sport, and I think it has in the last few years. But is there anything you look at with the sport that you go, this is an easy fix or an easy solution to continue to make it more accessible, to get owners in, to get new trainers coming through? I mean, obviously there's like the obvious of like more prize money, but I'm moving away from the kind of obvious ones.
For me, the biggest thing is getting people on race courses.
Yeah, which is amazing.
And it actually amazes me that race courses don't see that as well. Like I use a case study of when I went to Goodwood a couple of years ago. Goodwood, who do an amazing job alongside York. You know, you can often be in a queue that's 3 or 4 deep and you're trying to get a drink for an owner in the owners and trainers bar and it's rammed, which is great. You get the people in. I bought 3 bottles of champagne for 3 different people because the queue was so big, because everyone was there. Once you get people in, they start spending money. Like, I've had family who haven't been able to get an owners and trainers ticket because we've used our quota to go and watch a Group 1 horse run. You get people in the track, they start spending the money. You spend more than your fee before you get there, and then you create the atmosphere, and then you create people having a good time, and it's all the knock-on effect. It's kind of like when you start training. You know, you've got to lower your training fees. I obviously train off a different training fee now to what I did when I started to try and attract people. You get people in, and then and then
that's why I'm an advocate for those music nights, because even if you've never been to the races before, you go to one of them. There's a big atmosphere. There's, you know, the racing might very much be secondary to a lot of people, and I understand that they might be there because they're Pixie Lott fans or whatever.
Yeah.
But if well, she was at Epsom. I don't think many people were out braving the rain to see her. But the point is that I think if you get them through the gates then you see a race, you hear the noise, you see that buzz, that atmosphere, and you go, oh, this looks like fun. I might come back now.
I 100% believe in that. Like, my cousins who live a few villages away, you know, I've got tickets for years for them. They are now massive racing fans. They used to come because they want to have a few drinks and this and that and go to Newmarket because it was a Friday night fun thing to do. They're now at Ascot, they're at Goodwood, they're at York, they're everywhere. They're racing fans. They're never going to work in racing. But if that's a small sample size as to getting people through the gates of these tracks, falling in love with a horse like Boughey, like Cato Star was to me as a kid, you know, you want to go and watch them. Like you that's just life.
Didn't you work there when he was there?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, no, I
cool.
can see Cato Star in my head. I used to chuck the feed at him and run. I was there with Denman and Cato Star.
That would have been cool.
I think just quickly on that, I think what we're seeing a lot more since COVID are people are prepared to pay for the experience now. You know, they've come away more from the sort of viral experience, and now they're prepared to go out to I mean, we're seeing huge uptake in concerts. And honestly, it blows my mind every time. Not every time I go racing, but the majority of times I go racing, there's more people than I expected. Whether that be Nottingham, whether it be Yarmouth, or it be the Guineas. And I agree with George. I don't think it's necessarily right that, you know, I'm not looking to bash race courses and things like that, but I agree they can just be very short-sighted. Get the guy through the gate, give them an opportunity to move freely and have a drink. And try to think about the bigger picture. And I think sometimes in racing we're looking for that short fix the whole time. And I do think the interest has increased since COVID.
Can I just, I don't think we've got too much longer left, sadly, but just a couple of like kind of wider points. Whenever I see like a political thing in racing, I hear Rafe Beckett, John, you know, like I hear the sort of more senior trainers, if you like, have a voice. Have you and the younger generation of trainers got a big voice in like the future of the sport, would you say? And do you want that responsibility?
Well, I mean, just quickly, I personally at this stage feel very conscious of stepping in on the big issues because I've only just really kind of got into a position I wanted to be in. And I just feel for me to then start chiming my two bob in. It's like, well, here he is, he's trained a couple of winners and now he wants to have an opinion. But I have thought a lot about it and discussed it briefly, like it's about time that our generation start to wade in on these things and have an opinion.
Yeah, it's important.
I think so, and I agree with George. You know, like but it is. There's a certain degree of having to do your time a little bit, in a sense that, you know, what weight does it have when you've trained a few winners and you think X or Y, and you know.
But isn't that quite an antiquated view that racing's racing's always been like that generation's
but I also think that's probably a worldwide thing in everything.
True,
you know,
like in the business.
You get a 22-year-old lawyer who starts telling the 65-year-old QC how to do his job, sort of thing. I do slightly get that, but at the end of the day, you know, George and I want to be doing this for the next however many years it is, and you know, we do have opinions. And they are there to be heard if we want to, but it's just forming those opinions and trying to.
Well, it probably takes a bit of time to understand it all as well.
In the right way as well, I think, rather than.
I'm grateful for John, you know, Gosden, who seems to articulate himself perfectly, really. And Hugo Palmer now is another strong voice.
He's never been shy of giving his opinion.
But he speaks very well. I don't necessarily feel like I need to add too much more. I feel like we're well represented by those guys at the moment.
I think it's just in a time where, you know, Hugo and I have got a WhatsApp group with George, the three of us.
I'd love to be on that.
You know, we just want Hugo to run racing sometimes, you know, because you actually need someone who has I was lucky enough to work with Hugo for 6 years, and he's a very close friend still, and you know, he is opinionated, but
he's not afraid to put his neck on the block.
He's not afraid to put his neck on the line. He's an incredibly intelligent man who understands the wider world as well as racing, and understands. I think he's shown perfectly what he's doing with Michael, that it's possible to do what they're doing. But he was outspoken again the other day. But he's right. You know, it does need to
hang their heads in shame.
That was about Chester, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What does success look like now for you guys, and how has that changed?
I think even at Ascot, you know, Boughey was more relief when he won, to confirm what he'd done. And
I mean, you watching Boughey was quite something. That's unbelievable. That was ridiculous.
But I actually
did you see?
I kind of thought that
it's like Scaloni when they scored the winner.
Game over.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I kind of thought it was game over out the gates, to be brutally honest. And I was hiding under the tree that I usually do, and I was kind of it was relief, you know. But it's also, I think I was almost happier when Zach Lloyd won the Sandringham, the Britannia. Sister won the Sandringham. He'd kind of been teed out for the race, and it was a bit more fun. Like my celebrating probably slightly different now to what it used to be, but yeah, it's all just steps up the ladder, isn't it? And you know, I'm not going away for a week on holiday and a tear up after winning a Group 1. It's sort of on to the next thing, and you know, you're kind of.
But you stopped drinking, right? So like, has that? Do you, and I think I'm maybe speaking slightly out of school here, but like it seems that everything in your kind of personal lives has all kind of found its peace, if you see what I mean. And I'm sure that behind the curtain that might not be the case, but certainly from the outside looking in, has that been a big part of your kind of happiness and success that you're experiencing now, would you say?
I probably have a different view on life now than I probably did before. And I think, as George knows, we're training more horses now. You know, as I said earlier, you know, it grew very quickly, and you know, my life is much simpler now.
Yeah.
But it's enabling me to in my opinion, be a better trainer and better product for my owners, better person to work with, I hope. And not that my life is just about me. I have a family now, and it's trying to just feel life is easier.
Yeah.
But if it makes me sharper in my professional job, I'd basically do anything to make that happen.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, there's a few trainers who don't drink. You know, Dan Skelton, I think he possibly is just a monster in what he does, and you become, you know, your tendencies move into different things. You know, you become more driven possibly, and I certainly feel that way.
Yeah, I'm much more settled in my personal life, and it's definitely reflective, like anyone that does any job. It's much more, it reflects in your professional life. I mean, that's just the gentle sways of life, isn't it? And but you know, one thing goes with the other. But yeah,
what does success look like for you now?
For me, like, because it's relatively new. It's, for me, success looks like the growth in the business and the right people supporting my business, and the right people surrounding the business, even the caliber of staff that want to come and work for me. That's what success feels like to me. The right people wanting to send horses, the people already in my yard wanting to support me, support me with more depth, and you know, just a general feeling of goodwill towards the yard, really, and that's what it feels like to me.